If the ancient Greek scientists could produce these gear systems 2,000 years ago, the whole history of Western technology would have to be rewritten.
And it is done on a flat model. But anyway, so think about this, people, especially the newbies out there. You know, they're telling us that the Earth is going around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour. And then, of course, the sun going around the Milky Way at 483,000 miles an hour. And then when we get up to the Milky Way going around to the Great Attractor, we are at 1,300,000 miles per hour. And this has been going on for millennia, and the skies have never changed. What is their excuse? Oh, the stars are so far away, you'd never know. And relativity, right? A bunch of nonsense.
Yeah.
Just because it was 2,000 years ago that these people were in the dark. Are you ever wrong? Because they probably surpassed us in several areas of engineering than what we are even at today. In fact, I'm sure they have, and I think that a lot of that has been hidden from us and is somewhere down in a Vatican, archive when they tried to suppress all this knowledge. So yeah,
well,
I love the way
I think it's safe to say that the ancients actually had an advantage over us because they were taught how to think and how to reason, whereas modern education is more along the lines of indoctrination, where we're taught how to follow rules, read from a book, and regurgitate information.
Yeah, absolutely true.
I don't think it's getting dark, do you? You're a big help.
The ballers will want to step in and say, oh yeah, well the ball Earth model, the globe Earth model has predicted eclipses for centuries successfully, which of course is just BS. The flat Earth model was around long before that, and they were predicting eclipses with astounding accuracy. But for the ballers to just walk in and kind of usurp all the credit, for which model is capable. And in fact, most of the ballers today will say that it's impossible to do eclipse predictions on a flat Earth, which of course, again, is nonsense. And this particular 2100-year-old device proves otherwise. And in fact, because 2100 years ago, regardless of what you may think about Eratosthenes and the confusion that surrounds that, this is something that is absolutely, physical proof that we do have this piece of science from over 2 millennia ago that is based on a flat Earth cosmology and absolutely does predict the eclipses.
We ain't afraid. Always afraid.
But guys, don't ever let these ballers tell you that the eclipses cannot be predicted from a flat Earth model, because in fact, that is exactly how it always has been done.
We've often discussed, based on evidences from NASA official website, that U.S. Space Agency become the center of space agencies in the world, which has a budget of $19.3 billion per year. They are unable to compute the eclipse with heliocentric assumption. Therefore, NASA predicts the eclipse by using the Saros cycle made by ancient Babylonian, using the assumption that the Earth is motionless. Even though the evidence has been exposed in plain sight, a professor of astrophysics that we don't even need to mention his name, still tried to deny by saying that NASA does not use the Saros cycle and NASA have the software to calculate the eclipse without Saros cycle. Well, let's prove that the both statement was true or lie. Consider it just practice for you all, to take on the debate with the globers that doesn't want to accept reality. 1. Prediction of eclipses on August 21, 2017. Let's go to the NASA eclipse prediction on August 21, 2017. There's a link in the description. 2. Who predicts the eclipse at NASA? Please look at the bottom of that page. Written there, all eclipse calculations are by Fred S. Pennock, and he assumes full responsibility for their accuracy. Would you believe that? NASA's budget is $19.3 billion per year. All they do is trillion-dollar satellite business, that the cost charged to the telecommunication fees of people in the world, which they said already sent people 6 times to the moon. but for calculating eclipses just depends on a retired employee, named Fred Espenik. I am laughing. Fred Espenik, NASA's retired employee who responsible for calculating the eclipse. See the official explanation of NASA in Picture tab. And then, shamelessly, NASA wrote, he assumes full responsibility for their accuracy. I am laughing again. 3. How Fred Espenik predict eclipse? Now, let's verify the statement of fairy tales professor that NASA calculated the eclipse does not use Saros cycle. NASA may not predict it. Who predicted was a former employee named Fred Espenik. Don't get it wrong, guys. Who we laugh at is NASA, not Fred Espenik. Indeed, it shows that Fred had the knowledge that not possessed by all scientists who are hired by NASA. From here, we can draw the conclusion. Fred Espenik is a rare human being. So rare, that even after retirement he remains the only sources of NASA in predicting the eclipse. Now, use your intellectual brain. Let's see how Fred Espenik predicts an eclipse. Please open the NASA eclipse predictions from year 1870 until 2573. Okay, it's crazy how great the man who predicts eclipse. There's a link in the description. Apparently, based on statements in the official NASA website, Fred Espenik calculated eclipses based on yes, Saros cycle. I am laughing again and again. No way to run, NASA. 4. The NASA Eclipse Prediction Software. The professor also referred to a link that said, NASA software for calculating or predicting eclipses. Please check the link in the description. Just try to tell him to wear glasses and read correctly, at the bottom right of this website. And what is it? Eclipse software that published by NASA is use. The Saros cycle. Very, very funny. Please take your own conclusions. The statement that NASA doesn't use the Saros cycle and NASA have a software to calculate the eclipse without Saros cycle is true or lie. 5. Geocentric coordinates. It is obvious that the NASA eclipse predictions using the Saros cycle, assuming if the Earth motionless. Please check the NASA official explanation about the eclipse on August 21, 2017. Clearly written in that NASA's explanation. The geocentric coordinates. That means, the path of the eclipse using the coordinates with the assumption the Earth is center of the universe. Why? Because, if the Earth rotates with 1670 kilometers per hour, there will be no pattern of eclipses. That's funny too. Guys, they actually already cornered. There have been many lies. Had reached the stage where the accumulation of the lies of $1 trillion could be brought down through the assumption of the essence. The distance, the diameter, speed from Earth, Moon, and Sun based on heliocentric version was totally wrong. Proven that it cannot be used for calculating eclipses. And here's our challenge. Please prove that our statement is wrong. Please calculate 3 times the eclipse, make a model according to heliocentric dogma, scale on neutral software like Sonoma 4D, AutoCAD, etc. No one will. NASA, with a state budget or people's money, $19.3 billion per year was not able to do so. 6. The wrong position of the Moon and Sun. Recently Dr. Zach, one of Flat Earth's brightest and bold researchers, published the results of the software calculation, that the eclipse of August 21, 2017 it is not possible to occur if you use heliocentric assumption. NASA eclipse animation, without the scale of the distance of diameter and speed heliocentric version. There is no shadow tapered like that. Been forced to be match. Propaganda for tricking people. We can be a little heartened, Flat Earth societies who did the study without eating people's money, thus diligently performs measurements and experiments with scientific method. The debate is not just pointing to another link that actually there is no answer. Dr. Zach take this scientific data. Prediction of eclipses on August 21, 2017 from NASA official website. The position of the Sun from suncalc.org on the date, hour, minute and second occurrence of eclipses. The position of the Moon from mooncalc.org on the date, hour, minute and second occurrence of eclipses. Enter all data in neutral software like AutoCAD. It's like our challenge to the open letter, isn't it? For them it might be an incredible hard thing. For us, it is indeed a regular research that we do. Apparently, by using that general science data, the Moon and Sun position are wrong. With such a position, eclipses should occur at sea, not in the US as NASA writes. With such a position of Moon and Sun, there could be no eclipse in the US as NASA predicted. Then, Dr. Zach puts the official science data into the AutoCAD software. The result is, there is no eclipse in the US or at the sea. Eclipse deviated far out of the Earth. It's funny, very funny. 7. Just one time of the eclipse it has already knocked out. The highlights of the results from Dr. Zach's study is, it turns out the heliocentric cosmology to quantify one-time eclipse has already failed. It's not possible for 3 times eclipse is the challenge we ask. Dr. Zach's study review link is in the video description. 8. NASA trying to eliminate traces. If you notice, NASA never once replied directly to the thousands of critics proposed by flat earthers. They use other strategies. NASA hires trolls to beat flat earth videos with skewed comments to prevent people from watching flat earth shows. Therefore, if I may suggest to all friends, turn off the comment field in your videos. Do not give a chance to the trolls who do not watch the videos but littering your work. The second way. NASA does not directly respond, but secretly reacts by removing traces. This is an example. Dr. Zach criticized NASA's hiding and wrote, "Eclipse prediction is Fred Espenek's responsibility." Now, if you open the same link on the official website of NASA, the article has been deleted by NASA. Replaced with these words. It's the extraordinary efforts of NASA to remove the traces, isn't it? NASA monitors the various criticisms of the flat earthers, and secretly revise to eliminate the traces. My advice, go immediately save all NASA's data about the Saros. Briefly, it can be removed sometimes.
Based on Babylon.
Seen anything like it before?
No one has.
Where did you get it?
Well, you remember that total eclipse of the sun about a week ago?
You can buy right now a watch with an Antikythera mechanism inside. I don't know if you know that.
No, I didn't. That's amazing.
Yeah, just for the people know. This is one of the most expensive watch. It's just for elite people, of course, because if you have this watch, you want to know that the Earth is flat. So this watch, you know, if you want to buy this, you must be paid like $300,000. And yeah, because it's with diamonds, you know, gold and things like that.
Step
but it's because
Rolex.
they want to. Yeah, of course, they just want to, you know, these kind of things only the elite people have. And here you can see a Gleason type map in the right side of the watch. You can see the constellations in the left side, and the lunar eclipses, and all these is, you know what is the company? That is the funny thing. The company called Bovet, which means you know, a dome. You know, that is the company that made this watch. $350,000, and you have a mechanism based entirely on Antikythera, you know, machine. Here you have the Bovet Recital 20 Asterion watch. And if you look the documentary when they present this, the guy, of course, this watch is from Switzerland, you know, Templars. So they have all the knowledge. And in the documentary, the guy start to, drop some words based on the flat Earth and that secret knowledge. It's amazing.
That's astounding. Okay. Great find here. Awesome.
These machines was in the hand of Archimedes, right? the guy who make all the equation for density, buoyancy, and that kind of things. And the Roman Empire, and this is the real history behind that. The real empire of the Roman Empire, they sent a group of soldiers specifically to capture this machine and bring it with this guy, the name of, the density guy, Archimedes. The order was, bring me Archimedes and the machine. And when the soldiers go to capture this, they kill Archimedes. There was killed.
Really?
So,
they killed Archimedes?
yeah,
Seriously?
this is the
Wow.
picture.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
this is the picture. This is
Okay.
the picture. Because they supposedly they get confused and they didn't know that this old man was Archimedes. So the problem was they take the machine, but they don't know how to use it. And if you start to think in this kind of thing, you come across that, like 2,000 years ago was established the Roman calendar. And I mean, if you have this knowledge and you come across with this technology and you start studying the movement of the sun, the movement of the planet, and all this kind of thing, you can check and you can check the real, nature of the movement of the things. I mean, we know that the Roman calendar was correct a few times, and it's all, have 28 days, but then in 4 years, we're going to have one more day to 5 ready, and month of 30 days, and month of 31 days, because was a ship from Roman who have a trouble, sailing in the open waters of Europe, and the boat go down. They sink. Right. So that is why we found that apparatus. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say, but
that's very interesting. Very interesting. So wow, it just never ceases to amaze me. Again, because of the way that history is rewritten or retold or just obscured, how little of this data is available to people unless you really, really, really dig for it. And then even then, it's, a lot of times you'll get the response that, well, that's very highly questionable. Of course, I think we kind of do the same thing. Jaron said many times that, after, when you go back so far in history, most of the original source material has been destroyed. So it's really hard to actually come up with true artifacts that are, of like the age of the Antikythera device, going all the way back to Archimedes. So, it's really a rare find, and it's something I'm sure that the powers that be would have rather not had emerged into the mainstream.
Right. And if you look up Wikipedia's, description of his death, it's just a mention. It's just a mention that maybe perhaps this might have happened, and maybe perhaps this might have happened. So what you start to learn is that when you see things like that, those are the things you want to go look into. When you see the things that are these big, long, exorbitant, descriptions like the Aristophanes experiment or whatever, then you know that they're pushing an agenda. It's just easy to start to kind of unravel what things are they trying to hide, what things are they considering not important, because those usually turn out to be the important things. It's hard for them to hide something like that, so it has to be mentioned in the Wikipedia, but it's mentioned in passing. So,
yeah, I believe this. The Antikythera mechanism is a really great computer, and after they have in their hand this device, they start to create, for example, things like the astrolabio or the sextants, which is like a tiny part of this kind of mechanism. And of course, they make the reverse engineering and they come across with the globe.
Yep. Oh, and by the way,
they have the tools. I mean that.
One thing that's interesting about the Antikythera device, and I learned this while researching it, is that guess what everything is based off of, all the rotation? 2,100 plus years ago. You got it. Polaris.
Yes. Exactly.
Bada
You know,
bing.
one-
One more time.
What's the matter? What is that?
The path that the moon's shadow makes over the Earth during a total eclipse is called the path of totality. To see a total eclipse, you must be in the path of totality.
It upsets all our ideas.
Heliocentrists claim that lunar eclipses are caused by the shadow of the ball Earth occulting the Moon. The idea is that the Sun, Earth, and Moon spheres perfectly align like 3 billiard balls in a row so that the Sun's light casts the Earth's shadow onto the Moon. Unfortunately for heliocentrists, this explanation is rendered completely invalid due to the fact that lunar eclipses have happened and continue to happen regularly when both the Sun and Moon are still visible together above the horizon. For the Sun's light to be casting Earth's shadow onto the Moon, the three bodies must be aligned in a straight 180-degree syzygy. The Newtonian hypothesis involves the necessity of the Sun, in the case of a lunar eclipse, being on the opposite side of a globular Earth, to cast its shadow on the Moon, but, since eclipses of the Moon have taken place with both the Sun and the Moon above the horizon, it follows that it cannot be the shadow of the Earth that eclipses the Moon, and that the theory is a blunder. By William Carpenter, 100 Proofs the Earth is not a Globe. That the eclipser of the Moon is a shadow at all is assumption, no proof whatever is offered. That the Moon receives her light from the Sun, and that therefore her surface is darkened by the Earth intercepting the Sun's light, is not proved. It is not proved that the Earth moves in an orbit round the Sun, and therefore, by being in different positions, conjunction of Sun, Earth, and Moon, day sometimes occur. The contrary has been clearly proved that the Moon is not eclipsed by a shadow, that she is self-luminous, and not merely a reflector of solar light, and therefore could not possibly be obscured or eclipsed by a shadow from any object whatever, and that the Earth is devoid of motion, either on axis or in an orbit through space. Hence to call that an argument for the Earth's rotundity, where every necessary proposition is only assumed, and in relation to which direct and practical evidence to the contrary is abundant, is to stultify the judgment and every other reasoning faculty. By Dr. Samuel Robotham, Zetetic Astronomy, Earth Not a Globe. According to the globular theory, a lunar eclipse occurs when the Sun, Earth, and Moon are in a direct line, but it is on record that since about the 15th century over 50 eclipses have occurred while both Sun and Moon have been visible above the horizon. By F. H. Cook, The Terrestrial Plane. As early as the time of Pliny, there are records of lunar eclipses happening while both the Sun and Moon are visible in the sky. The Greenwich Royal Observatory recorded that during the lunar eclipses of July 17, 1590, November 3, 1648, June 16, 1666, and May 26, 1668 the Moon rose eclipsed whilst the Sun was still above the horizon. Mccullouch's Geography recorded that on September 20, 1717 and April 20, 1837 the Moon appeared to rise eclipsed before the Sun had set. Sir Henry Holland also noted in his Recollections of Past Life the April 20, 1837 phenomena where the Moon rose eclipsed before the sun set. The Daily Telegraph recorded it happening again on January 17, 1870, then again in July of the same year, and it continues to happen during lunar eclipses to this day. It is alleged by the learned that at a lunar eclipse the Earth casts a shadow on the Moon, by intercepting the light of the Sun. The shadow, it is alleged, is circular, and as only a globe can cast a circular shadow, and as that shadow is cast by the Earth, of course the Earth is a globe. In fact, what better proof could any reasonable person require? Powerful reasoning, says the dupe. Let us see. I have already cited a case where Sun and Moon have been seen with the Moon eclipsed, and as the Earth was not between, or they both could not have been seen, the shadow said to be on the Moon could not possibly have been cast by the Earth. But as refraction is charged with raising the Moon above the horizon, when it is said to be really beneath, and the amount of refraction made to tally with what would be required to square the matter, let us see how refraction would act in regard to a shadow. Refraction can only exist where the object and the observer are in different densities. If a shilling be put in the bottom of a glass and observed, there is no refraction. Refraction casts the image of the shilling upwards, but a shadow always downwards. If a basin be taken and put near a light, so that the shadow will shorten inwards and downwards, but if the rod is allowed to rest in the basin and water poured in, the rod will appear to be bent upwards. This places the matter beyond dispute and proves that it is out of the range of possibility that the shadow said to be on the moon could be that of the Earth. By Thomas Winship, Zetetic Cosmogony. In an attempt to explain away the inconsistencies in their theory, heliocentrists usually claim light refraction must be happening on a scale large enough to account for the phenomena. George G. Gary in his Astronomy and Astronomical Instruments claims that this is the reason the full moon has sometimes been seen eclipsed above the horizon before the sunset, due to a horizontal refraction of 36 or 37 minutes, generally about 33 minutes, which is equal to the diameter of the sun or moon. Even if this highly implausible reverse-engineered damage control explanation is accepted, it cannot explain how Earth-bound observers are supposedly able to see 12,000 miles 180 degrees around the globe. Even if we admit refraction, and that to the extent seemingly required to prove that when the eclipsed moon is seen above the horizon, we are still confronted with a fact which entirely annihilates every theory propounded to account for the phenomenon. Taking the astronomer's own equation of 8 to the mile, varying inversely as the square of the distance, for the curvature of the Earth, where Sun and Moon are both seen at a lunar eclipse, the center of the Sun is said to be in a straight line with the centers of the Earth and the Moon, each luminary being 90 degrees from the observer. This would give about 6,000 miles as the distance of each body from the observer. Now, what is the curvature in 6,000 miles? No less than 24 million feet or 4,545 miles. Therefore, according to the astronomer's own showing, an observer would have to get up into space 4,545 miles before he could see both Sun and Moon above his horizon at a lunar eclipse. As lunar eclipses have been seen from the surface of the Earth with Sun and Moon both above the horizon at the same time, it is conclusively proved that there is no curvature of the Earth, and, therefore, that the world is a plane, and cannot by any possibility be globular. This one proof alone demolishes forever the fabric of astronomical imagination and popular credulity.
It upsets all our ideas.
Something's wrong.
Mike here, glad you could join me. This is the short version of Soundly's photo that was used in Glowbusters. Now, Soundly was on Glowbusters, and he showed Bob and Jared that you can pull a moon image out of the eclipse. And I thought that was very strange, since out of the hundreds of photos taken of the eclipse that day and all the many raw image data that was sent to me, nobody saw the moon at all, except, well, for Soundly, of course. And so Bob believed Soundly, and since Bob believed Soundly, well, then I was interested because I was after a real picture of the moon. Now, I'm not against Soundly, and I totally disagree with his Lake Pontchartrain conclusions. I totally disagree with him faking the ISS video he just put up, and some other things he's faked. But, you know, it is YouTube, and you are allowed to content create whatever you want to get subs and ad revenue. I run no ads on my channel, and I receive no revenue from my channel but that which people donate to me once in a great while, and I am thankful for that. But anyways, Bob went ahead and contacted me, asked me was Soundly's image fake. Now, I gave Bob a definite yes, it has to be fake, because, you know, if you have 100 people pointing their camera at the forest and only one person gets that picture of Bigfoot standing in front of everybody, well, that's kind of suspicious. And so I went in to pursue to investigate this. And normally I use forensic software and Photoshop to debunk UFOs, ISS fake stations, and destroy NASA. And all that's not hard to do. I've never really looked at an eclipse before, and there's some things I had to understand about the rotation of the eclipse, the position of it at various locations, before I was able to make a determination on some things. And so it was a learning process for me. However, I was determined to get the truth, as always, and I deceived no one. This zip file or rare file that you see here, I got, this was sent to me after I went to Soundly and Sean. They gave this link to me here on a Google Drive, and I downloaded the zip file. It's taken from a Nikon D4. I know Soundly owns a Rebel T5 and a P900. I don't know who owns the Nikon D4, or even if the Nikon D4 is real and maybe it was just faked in the EXIF data. I have no clue. The two pictures in the set of pictures that are real and untouched are these two here, this one and this one. And after I examined the images, I went back to Sean and I told him flat out, these are not real. You guys manipulated these. And he still won't come clean. And I don't understand that thinking. If you fake something, just say you faked it and let everybody move on. You know, just admit it and drop it and let's go. But however, Sean would not do that, so I did not let the pressure off of them, and finally Soundly messaged me a little bit too late though, because I did offer him to come in the video with Anthony Riley and I guess he was at doing a football game. I don't know, maybe he didn't get the message in time, but I certainly did invite him to see what I did and how I determined his images were faked, and to answer any questions that he had about it, to do it up front. He says, Mike, tell me, I did not use that image, but the fact that the image exists is a problem. For full disclosure, you should give it to either Sean or myself. Why are you not doing so? So here we have panic mode time, but now they want to come clean. But the problem is, Anthony and I had already made the video, and I asked them. I was on Sean's live chat, and they had ample opportunity to say, hey, Mike, yeah, we faked the image. That's all they had to do. It wasn't that difficult. It's not that hard. If you faked it, you faked it. So what? Most YouTube channels out there faked, and folks, every photograph you see on a magazine cover is touched up and not the real image. That's just how things are. And I'm not saying anything's nefarious about doing that, but when you're doing research and you're trying to find out if something was in the sun or not, if the moon was there or not, and that data can't be faked. That's doing research. So I don't need the images photoshopped for me or the moon added in. The image that I told you that was real is this image here. And we'll just go to image adjustments. I'll do the same thing I did in the long video. And then we'll just maybe do some levels on this. But this image here is 100% real. There's no moon image in here. If you notice this blue area, there's no distortion in this blue area. That's because there's no image overlaid in here. Everything's even. It's not pixelated out, and there's just nothing in this image. When you shut off the different channel colors, the image remains the same. Nothing changes. All the pixel data is there on all three channel colors: the red, the green, and the blue. And so that tells me that this image is not manipulated, at least in the sense that a moon picture wasn't added on here. Everything in the image gradients out like it should. There's no extra image in here, nothing that would tell me that it's fake or blocking anything. And all the pixel data is the same in the whole image. And that's another thing I didn't cover in the other video. In the faked images, the pixel data is at a lower resolution than the rest of the image. But if we were to zoom in here, we get this real fine pixel data. It's nice and fine. You can see this. Now remember this, and we'll come back to this here in a second. This image here is the one Soundly used on Globebusters. Now if we just go to image and see what we can find here. There we go. Now we are getting a picture of the moon. So awesome. But in this image, we are also getting something else. And you can see this line across there. There is in the box pasted. I'll bring it on to something else. Now, the thing that bothered me with this image here, and if we zoom in, you can see how crazy how bad the pixel data is. Let me show you the real image here. This pixel data as opposed to this larger, chunkier pixel data. Smooth pixel data, chunky pixel data. Smooth pixel data, chunky pixel data. And so the chunky pixel data is simply because somebody's overlaid a lower resolution image in here, mainly a moon photo. And the other thing about this, unlike the other one, when we turn off the green and the blue, we still have our moon photo in here. But when I shut off this green channel, our moon photo disappears. And then once again, you can see the square box start to appear in here. And so this tells me 100% this image is fake, manipulated, and you know, this moon image should be on all these channels, which I showed in my other video. Unlike this image here, this is original, and once again, it stays the same. Nothing changes, no matter what color channel you're on, and that's the way it should be. So I found this box, and I highlighted it in here. Here we can see there's a box in here, and this box is in here because Soundly or Sean or somebody overlaid a picture of the moon on top of this image. It's there. You can't hide it. It's not at all in this image here. This image here is fine. It depixelates and equalizes evenly. This image here, not so much. It's right in here. We get that box image that somebody overlaid, and that was the moon. Here's the image. I brought it out a little more using this, but if we, you know, it's just on the green channel. If we enable another channel, look at it. It's not there. On the red channel, it's not there, but we enable the green, it shows up. Disable the green, it's not there. Blue channel, same thing. If we just use the blue channel, it's not there. You just get this pixelated mess in there because they overlaid something on top of there.
I knew there was something wrong when I saw that light. Tell me, am I going blind? Tell me, am I going blind?
So just to talk Eclipse here. I know Mark is saying you have a hangout later on with Mike Elmick and a few others, so I'm not going to get too much into the image processing. I'll leave that with you guys for later on. But this, what I'm going to present, will definitely back up what I'm sure Mike and your group will be talking about later with the Photoshop and the imaging, trying to bring out a moon in the image is the main key that we've been trying to work on. So what I did was I went and made a model of an eclipse. This is a 3D screenshot. So this is in Blender, I made a model, put a solid object in the model, put you know, the light source behind it, put in the atmospheric particulate matter to the right ratios and densities of air, and with the right anisotropic properties of light coming through an air medium, and hit it with the light to simulate the sun, which is this is to scale, so it's at, you know, 1.5 million lumens, and the distances are correct, to try and simulate an eclipse. And what the model renders, as you can see, you would expect to see a crescent around the actual object itself as it enters into totality, which no one saw or observed in reality. And then I went to the next phase to say, okay, well, how would the light distribution work within that type of anisotropic particle system? So as light hits a solid object, you would expect to see the same crescent with a little bit of backscatter lighting around it. As the light comes around a solid object, you would get a rendering of the entire orb, i.e., if it is the moon or a solid object, in the field in the camera lens with the filter on, right? And you should see a bouncing effect off of the front face, the leading edge. As the light hits the object, it bounces out radially right? So that's what all these lines are in the blue spectrum, because it goes to red and then slows down as it reflects it, it polarizes. So all reflecting light polarizes and heads backwards and creates this effect on the other side. And then the non-polarized light comes around the other side and creates these halos, which is what we see normally, you know, moon halos, sun halos, rainbows, etc. So that's actually what light is supposed to do. And then for a comparison, so this is my control, right? This is what it should look like. And for comparison, I took some moon shots from some friends of mine, really excellent photos. Did the same process on it, didn't change the settings. I just changed the process, just changed the photo, used the same settings for the analysis. And a moonshot would transpose to this. So you'll see this is the crescent at the front, now brought forward, and you can still see that there is a moon object in the background. This is like backscatter light. And then I compared that to, let's see, this image here. This is during the eclipse as it approached totality. And what I found the most fascinating about this is you get the red split spectrum that appears in the sensors of the cameras, which isn't that unusual. You see refraction and lens flaring that kind of splits the image in the red spectrum. But what was fascinating was this thing here, being that it's an inverse image of this side of the object coming around and being inverted backwards and being forward projected. So it's being forward projected to you as the observer on the ground to a centralized focal point. So it's this thing, whatever it is, whatever the light's coming through, being refracted and being projected like a lens to you at the ground and appearing in front of you. And you can kind of see, if I zoom in a little bit on this image. Oops, go back one, right there. So this is the actual object being refracted, and there's a whole bunch of little tiny ghost ones in the air. Right, you can kind of see them being split out in the air. And what happened during the eclipse, well, I'll show you how that analyzes actually first. So what I analyzed was I took it to this spectrum gradient to take out some of the red and bring the black forward, right, so I could, you know, wash out all the interfering light patterns to see what I could see. And it renders out to this here. And there's some interesting things in this picture. So here's that object again being forward projected. There is something, a little bit of a dot up here that appears to be a physical object of some kind. And then this gradient shows the edge of whatever is causing the eclipse. It cannot be seen, so it's actually not visible. Because when I take it to the other spectrum, like I did with the moon and my control, there's nothing there, right? Absolutely nothing. Except you can see that something is causing the magnetic field, which is, you know, light traveling through the field is photons, and photons have magnetic fields. So, you know, magnets can bend light as they travel through, they become polarized. You can see that this is the focus point, and those little half moons do kind of sort of appear in the gradient. But whatever's causing the eclipse is completely absent. There's nothing there. And so what I went to the next phase of the analysis to see, well, what can I see if I invert that to a negative and amplify it? So I did that to try and find out what was there, if anything. And then what I found was, well, there's the light, because it's intense, so it comes out just as a gray wash because this is a negative. And whatever is supposed to be there is not there, but you can see that it is having an effect on the light scatter in the negative field. And whatever is coming through that object down to create this half moon is causing a bending of the light being forward projected down here. So the angle's coming through from the top right down through the object, appearing here to be forward projected to the center of frame, and then scattering in the background below it in the left. So that tells me there's an electromagnetic cause. There's an electromagnetic force that is causing this to happen in that gradient. And I did it in two different gradients just to amplify it to see what's really happening here.
Well,
So,
that's pretty amazing.
yeah, it is. Yeah. So then the next thing is, okay, well, what's causing that, right? And the typical NASA response in their videos online in the mainstream media is that what we're seeing, that blue object, if I go back here, this blue object here is coming down through the atmosphere plane above our heads, through our air and everything else. And it's being forward projected and causing all these little moons on the ground by the millions. People took thousands of pictures of these. Sometimes, depending on if you were north of the equator or south of the equator, they would appear upside down. Or if you were north of the equator, they appeared the other way, right? With the crescent facing up, and they were being inverted as a shadow. So this is like the same image being rendered as white light on the ground, because it's going through the blue into the white spectrum change. So then I said, well, how far, where is that actually happening and what's causing it? And I looked at some high altitude footage at 75,000 feet with the 360 camera. And that's what the eclipse looked like at 75,000 feet through a 360 camera.
Wow.
And there's all those little orbs again. I was like, wow, right? Like literally, wow. And there's the orbs. And you can see that, there could be a little bit of frosting or ice or whatever on the lens camera, but it's at altitude, right? So it's cold up there, 75,000 feet. But that doesn't say that that's the cause. What that tells me is the angle of light that's being projected to the lens, because you're getting an unequal distribution of light scatter. Some are over here. This one's being illuminated more than this one. This one's a full dead-on center. So this means the light's coming almost perfectly to the center of the lens as it looks out through the medium. You're getting a really nice rendering of the image. So that tells me that's a multiple diffraction pattern, right? It's coming from all angles in a like your perspective, right? Your degrees of your perspective coming at all angles into a center point. So it's multiple diffraction, right? There's no way of getting around that. So millions of these diffraction angles are now being projected down onto the cat. And it's not just cats, it's dogs too. There's a dog, right? So we're going to be fair. The dogs got it too, yeah. It's raining cats and dogs. Yeah. So
raining moons on cats and
raining
dogs.
moons on cats and dogs, yeah, exactly. So, we've all most of us have seen that video where, it was particularly NASA was trying to explain that, that's just a pinhole effect where the light comes through the trees and causes the trees to act like pinhole cameras, and you get multiple projections on the ground. Well, being an artist and painter, that's another one of my hobbies. I do music, art, and paint. I know how pinhole cameras work, right? And what a pinhole camera will do is you can take a pinhole camera light, and what it does, it'll actually invert the image, but it projects the entire field of view, right, through a pinhole, and replicates the entire image on a background, right? It is true that pinhole cameras will work, but pinhole cameras will not split multiple images into multiple refractions unless it's coming from multiple angles. You see what I mean? You'd have to have a million holes in this type of screen, or on that mirror. This one's actually being projected through a pinhole and reflected off and bouncing in the room. But you'd have to have millions of holes in it, and each image coming from a different angle in order to get multiple images of the same thing from all different angles, like a three-dimensional effect. And that's what that is on the ground, is a three-dimensional scattering. Right? It's coming from all angles, every direction, multiple intensities. So there's no way to say that that is a pinhole camera effect. And we have to reverse that in our minds. So here I'll show you something here with the moon here. To be fair, we'll compare a picture of this image I showed you before with that orb thing, compared to a moon that Judith sent me. This is one of Judith's pictures. And she had sent me, and she said, here's the red. So the red is normal, right? And this green here, greenish area, if I was to invert that and do the same thing, you would see that, well, that's this just being reversed, right? That's normal. Light bouncing, there's the orb. But in this case, there is nothing here, and it's being forward projected through a lens, right? That's the only way. That's the comparison. The moon will scatter it and cause a flash image or a flare of itself. And this is completely different. So it's not the same thing. So then I concluded that, let me see what else is going on. One of the best explanations I could come up with in a model to say, how is that happening, is this image here. So I took it into a model. I made an orb. This is a plasma field of UV light. This is a solid object in a 3D model. So the light scatters everywhere within the model itself. So it's just like a square, but the light source scatters everywhere. So it's going in all directions. But since the source is localized to a projected point, as the light bounces around in the field, the particles go through the orb and go back to the source. So that creates a shadow. So if you imagine that you were standing inside of this orb looking back towards the sun, you would actually be seeing your own shadow, canceling out the light that's trying to reach you, because now it's going back just as fast as it is trying to come towards you. It's your own shadow, in essence, traveling backwards. That's one of the processes I'm trying to understand, see how that works. Then I simulated in a model the same setup. So I took a light, a very intense light, 1,000,000 lumens. This is a solid, right here is a solid moon simulated object, or something to interfere. It's a sphere to interfere with the light. And then this area here is a simulated dome lens to give it something to appear on and focus on. And then this field underneath here is a particle field. So it's a semi-transparent particle field to simulate the atmosphere. So it hits that, bounces through, creates the half moon through the air, and bounces on the ground to create the half moon over here. So that was my first attempt to say what can be causing this. So you can see that in this rendering, in this model setup, it's just a projection, like a standard projection at a movie theater type of idea. So it's backlit. This would be like, what was his name that did the one with the monkeys, you know, the Space 2001. Yeah, Stanley Kubrick came up with this back projection type of thing, right? So the whole NASA thing. But anyway, that's kind of like what they use. But you can see you only get one rendering of the image, and as it travels through the lens, hits the air, travels to the ground, it expands to create, you know, what would be a shadow on the ground or illuminated crescent. It's not making millions of them, right? It's only making one. And no matter where you move with the light source, you're only going to get one image projecting forward through that type of lens. So that tells me that in order to make this happen, you need millions of lenses, individual crystals, and the light has to be traveling down the center of a crystal to be projected like a hologram or like a laser. Like when you do a laser, you send the light through a crystal, make a perfect laser, focus the light, and then it hits the ground like a laser beam from many, many angles, all at the same time. Eclipse, without an object being there, the best explanation I can come up with for that so far is electromagnetic interference. So the light is there, but whatever that object is a black body radiation absorber that has an intense electromagnetic field, enough so that it'll allow some light to pass through its periphery surface, because it must have a boundary layer to have a charge, but it's so negatively charged on the inside, it absorbs everything that comes into it and lets very little of it come out. What does come out comes out in the blue spectrum, and what is inside of it is absorbing all the light and just making a black hole. It's like literally a black magnetic hole. Nothing comes out of it. So I took that idea and I took this image of the eclipse sent to me by a friend and started to say, okay, the light scattering from around the outside is following a magnetic pattern. This is just a magnetic toroid. So I'm trying to visualize that in 3 dimensions to either rule out that it is an electromagnetic orb object or a planetary object that's above the dome, and interfering with the light path trying to reach the surface and just canceling it all out. And it has some interesting ramifications too. What happens, the NASA thing where it's a forward projected image on the ground makes absolutely no sense. Because if I showed you that picture of the moon here again, let's scroll up here. There's the moon, and we should see that if that's actually reality, and as light passes through trees, right, then every crescent moon and every moon phase would come through the trees at night, and you would see animals in the forest that look like this, right? They would adapt, right, to be camouflaged, right? Every bird that flew over the sky as the moonlight came down, or the sunlight came down, would be projected as a secondary image on the ground, and you'd have, one bird would appear like an entire flock on the ground, and every animal predator be running around chasing ghosts that don't exist, right? So if your mind is going to accept that forward projection thing of NASA and pinhole cameras, I'm just suggesting you think again, right?
Can I ask you something, Chris? Is this only happening at the eclipse, or does those pictures with the shadows of the moon, or can that happen at any time, or is this just in the eclipse?
This is just during the eclipse. See, and that's what makes me ugly, is because I think it was either Time or Now This did the NASA video, and it actually says in that NASA video that this happens normally all the time. Sunlight or light, this is a normal process. Well, that's a complete and utter nonsense. It's not a normal process. It only happens during eclipses. Like I said, otherwise the moon would do it every day, right through the forest and the trees, and the sun would do that every day. If something passed between it and the pinhole camera in a tree, and there was a bird sitting in the tree, well, then you would see 1,000 birds on the ground, right? It doesn't happen, right? And it just blows my mind why that is. Yeah. But the long story short, if I can bring up some other,
Can I just say, in the chat room, Ditra, Dave, down the rabbit hole, Dave, he asked if you would show your tree with the apples in it.
The tree, yeah. So clearly what's going on to me is that we are, on the plane of inertia, right? We experience in this center point where the two negatives and positive come together and balance in a neutral. We experience a slightly biased system that's slightly biased towards the positive, so it keeps us down, right? We experience that as gravity. We're on the plane of inertia in the center of a magnetic field, toroidal, like a double toroidal field. All the light that's outside of it is coming through the firmament. You could call it the firmament, the dome, which could be, I don't know what it's constructed of. It's, like liquid molten glass that keeps everything from, keeps us safe. It creates a dome so that we have pressure in the system. You can't have an open system to vacuum and still maintain pressure, right? It just doesn't work. So you have to have something to contain the pressure that we experience as atmospheric pressure of 14.6 psi, whatever the number is. It's around 14 psi, right? And that's the only way that would work. And we're on this inertial plane, and this is like the tree up the center cone, right? The tree of life, the whole 9 yards. It's right there, and it goes in both directions. There's a negative and a positive. We just happen to be on the positive side of it, right? Which gives us the sense of gravity, but it's also neutrally negative. Like our bones are made of dielectrics, calcium. Our bodies are made of water. We have salt in our bodies. We have some iron in our bodies. So if the iron flows in the positive direction, it allows our blood to flow. The dielectrics and the negative side of it in our bones is actually what's holding us up. So it's the bottom side, the negative, that's actually allowing us to stand, because it's actually levitating us to a certain degree, helping our bones, which are calcium, float in a magnetic field. So that's the basic construct, and we're in the center of it. So then I got looking at the electrical side of it and studying the moon. Since we're talking the moon and the eclipses here, a friend of mine, Brad Gillen, he sent me these pictures, and what we did was oversaturated them just to bring out some of the colors of the image we were seeing. and the images in the color phase lines up with anodizing of titanium and other rare alloys. So the charge that causes the craters, which are all at 90 degrees to the surface, so nothing comes in at an angle, they're all sparked and arced to the surface to cause the craters on the moon. You can actually see the approximate voltage required at each point if you do it in a color spectrum, right? So as color changes, the more you saturate it, the deeper the color. So the golds are at about 50 volts, a million amps, whatever it was, right? High amperage, right? Low volt, high amperage, and just went bang and creates this crater, right? Some of them are negative, some of them are positive. The ones that have a raised center would be, the inverse of the ones that don't, right? It's just an inverse polarity. And you can call out some of the people that are trying to post images like this one here and superimpose the moon over front. I'm sure Dave or Mike will probably talk about that when he meets up there, but so I won't get into that too much, but that's what it really looks like in reality. So let's see. The next thing is kind of some evidence of that is in order to have a multiple diffraction, right, of it coming through a lens and getting more than one image on the ground, you have to have the object between, and the lens is between, the object is actually between the light source and the lens, and it just diffracts into multiple images. And here's another image. Now this person got a cool image. This came, Monique Chenard from Moncton here. She sent me a video, a link to a fellow that actually was talking about the Moon Group and asked me to get another video and to take a look at this. So I grabbed a screenshot just to discuss with everybody. My initial thoughts on this was that this is an image of the eclipse in progress. And you can see that this is the sun and this is the occulting object that's being refracted in the red spectrum. There's a bit of a duplication of this image in the center of this green orb here. So there's a duplication of it in red. You can kind of see it's very, very faint if I zoom in there. Sorry for the phone ringing there in the background. So there it is again. It's kind of like purpley pink here now. So that's just this image duplicated. And because of that, you can deduce. You say, okay, well, if this image is being duplicated slightly as a doubling effect, so that's a double image, then this green image is a double image of this red image. And if I was to take that out and do some color spectrum, if I had the original image, you could probably do that. And you would say that this Ankh type shape with the polarized plasma bouncing around inside whatever that is, it's like a plasma ball, the ones you put your hands on, right? Static charge, the plasma's on the inside, you touch it on the outside, and these lightning bolts, dance around the glass, right? That's, to me, that's my first instinct, is that's exactly what that looks like, right? So I'm leaning towards some sort of a, outside of the dome, there's another object, the light's passing through, canceling out the sun and projecting it forward. And it looks to be spherical of some kind, or some kind of a lens. And yeah, it's like the Ankh, that's the Egyptian Ankh type of shape. That just kind of blew my mind when I saw that. So I'm looking into that one with some more detail. But the main rub here is that the system and the plane that we're on in this reality, like looking at all of this evidence and the eclipses and everything else, is that the whole secret of the system is a dielectric neutral on the bottom, which goes back to that, the tree shape there, the double toroid. So we have the negative and the positive on the bottom, and the circuit, like we've gone through all those circuits of the ancient history with the cities being destroyed and the craters in the ground and all the destruction in the history and everything, is basically this. It's the earth and the oceans are a dielectric, and of course it has positive and negative, iron mountains versus salt mountains and everything else. It's obviously well distributed, but it has a bias to the negative dielectric, and then the positive is on the outside in a Gaussian sphere, like under the dome. The dome would have its own charge capacitance. Essentially, it's a giant capacitor. The dome itself is the outside boundary, and then the Earth center is a neutral, and it's just a positive and negative dielectric dance in the middle. And if you had the an air gap right to the ground and the air, and then plug that into the water, you've got the circuit that Tesla had in Tesla's tower. Right, it's exactly the same circuit with a coil on the top, a pipe into the ground, tapping into the water, and the ground circuit, and then an air gap in the vacuum in between, and the coil takes it off as a charge. And that's exactly what Tesla was doing, and I think that's why J.P. Morgan and all the rest squashed and confiscated and hid all of his work, amongst others. I mean, every time someone tries to come to the surface and bring this forward, it just gets squashed, because I think, one, you have to treat it with a lot of respect, because if you don't do it right, you know, you could be bringing down whatever it is above our heads onto our heads if you don't control it properly. And two, it's a free energy circuit. I mean, it's an unfathomably huge, never-ending free energy source, right? That's easily tapped into. It's just three-phase power with a vacuum gap. But, you know, you'd have to regulate and treat it with respect, obviously, and you don't want any Joe Blow out there trying to tap into the sky, because it's a dangerous source. And that's the thing, that, you know, they don't want that information coming out, whoever they are, you know, the ones, the powers that be, that want to control the energy and the oil and the power and everything else. It is really that simple. It's that simple a circuit. Just to go back to the eclipse thing, I did a little bit of an analysis here on some eclipse photos. What I did with this one is pretty much the same phase that I showed you before, where it's, you know, partial eclipse, and the object you can't see it, but the object would be in this zone here, and I'm zooming into just the edge of the object, right at the edge of wherever that arch is. And when I zoomed in on it, right, you can see that, yeah, it looks like there's craters there. Right, there's some craters and, you know, some backscatter light inside the black spot, right, just at the edge. And I zoomed in on that and tried to get some images of it to see what it was. Different ideas. So that was interesting in itself. But then what I also did was I checked the other side of it. Right, you have to check the other. You know, if you're going to be looking at it, you got to check both where the image is being occulted and what's being scattered on this side. So this would be, in theory, on the other side of the sun, and you get the same images appearing in this field as you do over in this field. So it's the same thing on both sides, whether it's on the black side or the red side or the lit side. It's the same type of effect. So it's just backscatter, you know, photon radiation that you're catching in the lens. So it's it doesn't indicate that there's any moon there at all, or any object, because you get the same thing either way. It doesn't matter. There's no evidence that that is actually the moon. So it's I found it quite fascinating.
So basically, nobody saw the moon before, during, or after the eclipse.
That's correct, in my opinion. Yeah.
So the conclusion would be that the moon didn't cause the eclipse. That would be the logical conclusion, right?
That's my logical conclusion. Yeah, it wasn't observed. Now, it's not to say that the moon during its phase of new moon isn't in the proximity of the sun and or behind it or somewhere else in the same field, right? And both are being occulted, right? Because we know the new moon phase is being occulted during the new moon. It just, you know, once a month it does it. That's a natural thing. So the difference is that the moon would pass through that cancellation field, you know, every month, but the sun only does it, you know, 3-4 times a year, right? So the constant is that there is something that is interfering with the light of both objects, right? A new moon is essentially a solar eclipse. It happens once a month. Right. The phases of the moon is a perpetual eclipse. It just phases in and out of eclipse phase, right? It just never stops. But the sun only hits that point, you know, 4 times a year. It's just a different path of the light. Right.
So could the sun be acting like the moon's phases, just only several times a year?
Yep, that's what I'm thinking. Yep, exactly the same thing. So whatever's causing that is it's consistent with both, but it's independent, right?
Yeah, makes sense. I mean,
yeah,
with those photographs we all saw now, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And what about I was thinking about the meteor craters, which are obviously not caused by any rocks from outer space. So could it have something to do with this electromagnetic force and with their lunar craters that we see?
You mean is there a tie-in between the craters on the moon and the craters on Earth? Is that what you mean?
Yes. Could they be caused like from a electromagnetic force acting under the Earth somehow?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's exactly what it is. In my opinion, it's the majority of the craters on Earth are caused by electromagnetic strikes and the cataclysmic type of arcing out. And it's quite possible that at one point in history, ancient history, the moon was actually involved in a huge electromagnetic storm, shorting out to the Earth's surface. Absolutely. That's people want to kind of look into that theory and stuff and how that actually works. Is to I recommend the Electric Universe websites, and there's 20 years worth of research there. But the interesting part is you can't find that on Wikipedia. It's actually a banned topic on Wikipedia. So the mainstream is not allowing anyone, or they're trying to stop people from looking at the Electric Universe theory because it backs all this up 100%. And even though the Electric Universe, I think the majority of those people that are studying, because they're all PhD electric, physicists and plasma physicists, and it's really high-end stuff. But the majority of those people aren't flat earthers. But the foundational principles upon which the Electric Universe theory is built is exactly this principle, right? It's a dielectric field. We're in a dielectric circuit, and we're in a capacitance type of process between the two. There's a charge differential. As above, so below, but it's inverted, and it's just backward.